Attention passengers, today on Strangers on a Podcast, the strangers go back to the beginning of the Coens, that is. It's 1984, and a movie that contains a cowboy, 3 bullets, and a love triangle. Join us, won't you?
Hello, and welcome to the Movie Car here at Strangers on a Podcast. I'm the conductor, and with me is...
I'm Grimweed.
Hello, Grimweed. Welcome.
Hello.
Well, we're called Strangers on a Podcast because we're 2 guys who don't know each other, and we're talking about movies to see how they bring people together.
And just a couple of guys talking about some movies.
Are we going to drive each other nuts? Are we going to curse and scream one another out?
It's looked like it a few times.
Well, maybe. I thought we'd get along. Are we going to stay on topic?
It's never looked like that.
Well, it would be boring if we did, maybe. Today we are talking about the one and only Blood Simple.
That's not that simple.
It is a fairly complex film, yes. Came out in 1984, was written by Joel and Ethan Coen. It was produced by Ethan Coen and directed by Joel Coen. It was their first movie, yes. They got funding for it by making just like a little short film, a short trailer for this movie that they would like to get made.
And they were even in the movie.
They were in the movie?
Yes, they were.
Oh, those tricky Coens. And it was edited by Roderick Jaynes. Do you know who Roderick Jaynes is, Grimweed?
It's the guy that edited this movie.
No, it's a pseudonym.
Did you just say he edited this movie?
Yes, I did. But
how is that wrong?
Well, Roderick Jaynes does not exist. He's a pseudonym.
Oh, yeah, that's the pseudonym
brothers.
they use for the editor because of some kind of union thing or something. Exactly. And at one point, I think it was it for Fargo? But there was some movie that editor was up for an award, and they're like, well, shit, if we win it, we're going to have Albert Finney go up and accept the award.
Haha.
And I think they were going to have him accept it as Leo, if I remember right. But that could just be my mind thinking that I hope he would accept it in that character.
I'm guessing Roderick didn't win for Fargo that year?
No. And I can't remember if it was for sure Fargo. I know that movie won a bunch and was up for more.
But the music was by Carter Burwell, the Coen brothers' go-to composer, and it was shot by none other than Barry Sonnenfeld, who was their cinematographer in their first 3 films. He went on to shoot Raising Arizona with them and Miller's Crossing,
our last movie.
The last movie we did. It stars John Getz, who I'd never seen in a movie before. Had you ever seen him in anything else?
Okay, here we go again. So my whole problem with names things, it's going to come out a lot in this. So I'm going to tell you the names right now. So the star of this movie is not John Ritter.
No.
And that's what I'm going to call him. He is not John Ritter because you look at him and I'm sorry. It's Dime Store John Ritter. So he's not John Ritter. And I think John Ritter in this role could have been amazing.
Well, John Ritter
would have been
tended to be
fun
amazing
to see.
in a lot of things.
But yeah, so it's not John Ritter.
Can you name 3 other movies he was in? Because I can. Famous movies.
I know I've seen other movies he's been in.
He was in The Social Network by David Fincher. He was in The Fly by David Cronenberg. And he was in Zodiac, which was also by
was
Fincher.
The asshole ex-boyfriend. No, not doctor, editor or whatever. Ex-boyfriend dude in The Fly, right?
I don't believe that was him, no.
No?
If it was, I could be mistaken.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of who else.
Yes, I think it was. Was.
He was the one that got his hand barfed on.
Yeah, who got barfed on and partially digested by the brundlefly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we all know who John Getz is.
But still, it's not John Ritter.
It is not John Ritter.
And at one point he'll be the monster, another point he'll be Volkswagen Cowboy.
You and your wackadoodle nicknames that you just come up. Okay.
Well, do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
You don't know who the Volkswagen Cowboy is?
The Volkswagen Cowboy, no.
We were just talking about him. Before we started recording, you asked me if I knew what his name was.
Apparently I'm getting early onset Alzheimer's.
Emmett Walsh played the Volkswagen Cowboy.
The Volkswagen Cowboy.
Yes. He was dressed he had the cowboy hat, he was dressed as a cowboy and everything, and drove the Volkswagen. He's the Volkswagen Cowboy.
It also stars Frances McDormand in her debut as Abby. Frances McDormand has gone on to be one of the most treasured women in American cinema.
And she's been in 9 Coen movies. And this was her first time on a movie set and where she met her future husband.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Frances McDormand is a treasure we all appreciate, I think.
Yes, and she will most likely be Blue Eyes. She's won, I think, 3 Oscars, and I think one of them was Fargo.
And you know who she was roommates with at the time of this filming?
No.
Holly Hunter.
Oh yeah, she. They actually had wanted Holly Hunter for this role, but she was busy, and I think that's how she ended up getting this, is because they were roommates. And Holly Hunter is in this movie.
She is, sort of.
Well, part of her is.
Part of her is.
And it's a recognizable part.
Another amazing actress of her generation, Holly Hunter. We also have Dan Hedaya as Julian Marty,
That's Nick Tortelli.
What?
Nick Tortelli.
Nick Tortelli.
Yes. If you've ever watched Cheers, you will know Nick Tortelli. That was the first place I ever saw him, was Cheers. And anything I've ever seen him since, he's always to me been Nick Tortelli.
Was he the guy who was going after Carla?
Kind of the sleazebag ex-husband that kept trying to get her back.
Oh, that's what his character was.
Yeah, they were married at one point.
Okay.
And then he was always hitting on her after they split up. He ended up he came in with the dumb blonde big boobed wife that he was always trying to show off to Carla.
Genre fans and art house aficionados will remember him from Mulholland Drive and a
lot of other things that aren't Cheers.
He was in Clueless. He was Cher's dad in Clueless. He was in the Addams Family, the first Addams Family movie with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston.
He's been in quite a bit.
He's just one of those guys who you see him everywhere.
He was in Usual Suspects.
That's what I just said.
And he was in Clueless.
Yes, I just said Clueless too. Also has Sam Art Williams as Maurice, who I believe who's won several awards, but also
he's bartender guy.
More prominent in theater. Not sure if he's had that many film roles.
Yeah, he's bartender guy.
Bartender guy.
Yeah, because the only other thing I could think of for him is probably not the best thing to say. Not OJ.
I was going to think maybe Four Tops guy.
No, it was going to be not OJ. Because he had that look like OJ in the first Naked Gun movie.
Well, he wasn't stuck in a wheelchair or in a hospital bed through the whole thing.
Well, no, but just like the haircut and everything, it was kind of like there's not John Ritter. He was not OJ. But seeing how OJ is now, that's what I'm saying. He's bartender.
So for you, in a way, this movie should have starred John Ritter as Ray, Holly Hunter as Abby.
No. And
OJ as Maurice.
I don't think Holly Hunter as Abby. I think Abby was perfect cast.
But you would prefer John Ritter.
I'm saying the guy they had as the star reminded me of John Ritter in a way. And every time I'd see him, I would think, wow, John Ritter in this role would be amazing to see.
Well, John Ritter was a fine actor.
Yes, he was. And look at him.
Left us all too soon, by the way.
And like the way he was in Buffy, and just the way he went from all nice to just evil and
he played a
blink of an
robot
eye.
in Buffy, didn't he?
Yes.
Yes, and you may remember him as the shop owner in Sling Blade, where he showed some amazing.
Or Jack Tripper in Three's Company.
Everyone remembers him in Three's Company.
But still, I mean, he had a pretty decent range, and it's not something that you would necessarily expect from somebody coming from something like Three's Company. But yeah, I'm not saying that it should have been that. I'm just saying that that's every time I see him, it's like, yeah, he reminds me of John Ritter, and then I would think John Ritter would have been good in this role.
Is there anyone else you would have had cast as the Volkswagen Cowboy?
I could think of people that could have been interesting in that role, but I think he was fine. I don't have any complaints about his casting. I don't really have any complaints about any of the casting.
All right, then.
It's just to make it easier for my brain to get through this without having to try and remember names. I'm letting you know that's who these people are.
Well, it was M. Emmett Walsh as the private detective who goes unnamed throughout the entire film. But
unless you have subtitles on.
Unless you have subtitles on, or if you are familiar. I think his name is listed in the screenplay, and you get a hint at it based on.
Yes, his name is listed in the script. I've read that.
Yes, and you get a hint at what his name is based on a peek at his lighter, which has his name engraved on it. It's Loren, Loren, which I didn't know was a man's name.
Yeah, except for that's different than what he's called in everything else.
Well, I'm going to refer to him as the private detective because that is his name in the credits.
Yeah. And I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled Visser for the subtitles.
I would guess it's just Visser.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Visser, if it's Visser, or if, I don't know.
Lauren Visser. That's probably the name.
That's
I'm
possible.
trying to say it with a Texas accent. Lauren Visser.
Who knows? Anyway, but yeah, so like I said, that's Volkswagen Cowboy or The Monster.
The Monster?
Yes, and there is a reason for that. We will get to it.
What did you think of the movie, Grimway, overall? You've seen it how many times?
Surprisingly a lot for the short amount of time I've known about this movie.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. How long have you known about it? I mean, I've heard of it for many years.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's not new, and I didn't even know about it until recently. So what happened was the whole connecting movie thing. Mm-hmm. That wasn't intended. It just kind of happened when you threw the curveball at me for, we have something special planned for the May season.
Uh-huh.
And I about shit my pants because we had only ever talked about doing May in May.
Indeed.
And all of a sudden it's like, crap, now there's something planned for a season. Holy shit. That means I have to have more than just one movie.
I spoke, I spoke sort of headstrongly there. I misspoke, one could say. I didn't mean to set you up for
I realized that. It's just, then it became crap. Now, how can I connect May to anything else? And so it's like something special. So then that became, well, here we go. Now here's another movie with an Angela. Great, we can do that. Oh, wait a minute. No, because there's Mother's Day. We should do something that has some kind of a mother theme. Oh, now there's this cool one that we can do that has an Angela. And it just kind of fell together that way. Mm-hmm. And then it became, well, to make it something special and to move on, we really should connect this to what we move to next. And that became, well, here's this Ralph's connection that brought us into Big Lebowski. But since we're mainly like horror and sci-fi fans, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a good comedy. Hell, I'll even watch a good musical if it's a good musical.
It takes something to get me to watch a musical for the most part.
But yeah, then it's like, okay, well, what can I use once I get to Ralph's? That's Big Lebowski, but how do I get back to horror? So I tried to figure out some way to get back to horror to where it seemed like, okay, this is the something special we had planned. And okay, well, here's a Coen Brothers movie that is supposed to be the closest they get to doing a horror movie. So it's like, well, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. So watch that and it's like, okay, yeah, now I can, as far as connections, I can connect this movie all the way back to the first one. And then I started connecting everything in between. And since then, I've had to watch this movie probably another 7 or 8 times just to try and make those connections. So to answer your question, I'd say I've probably watched it about 10 times in the last month.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And I've only known about it for probably about that long.
For a month?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when I first mentioned this movie to you, but when I mentioned it to you, that was when I had first learned about it. And I think it was only maybe a month and a half ago.
I've known about Blood Simple for quite a long time. I'd never actually seen it until very recently when we decided to cover it. And I think I've only watched it twice since we made the decision to do an episode about it.
No, when you watched it, how did you watch it?
On Amazon Prime.
Okay. What they were showing, was that the Criterion version?
Indeed it was.
Okay. I was wondering about that because I know certain movies like HBO, when you watch it on there, it's the Criterion version, but certain services might not be that version of it. And that version is different.
Is it because it's shorter? It's the director's cut?
Well, there's a spot where he's driving up towards the incinerator. Okay. And alongside, there's a track that they had built for the camera and everything so they could follow that shot. Well, in the Criterion collection, or in the Criterion version, they were able to go back in and digitally erase that track. And then there's another spot when he's out in the field, and I guess there was a light or something they were able to go in and remove. There was something out in that field. I don't know if it was a light or a sign or whatever, but there's been things they've been able to go back and clean up specifically for the Criterion version.
Are you saying the Coen brothers do a George Lucas and go back and change their movies?
I don't know if it was necessarily a Coen decision or if it who decided. It could have been all three of them, but and we had talked about this before about commentaries for the different movies. And I said, I've not found a Coen commentary. That's not entirely true.
There is one for Blood Simple?
I've not seen them listed as commentaries. They're more listed as interviews, but it's Sonnenfeld and the Coens, and they're basically sitting there watching the movie. But it's more like you're just watching them talk, and they have the movie on a laptop or a tablet or something, watching it on there, and it cuts to the movie so you can see what they're talking about at times. And they'll even circle things. And it's like, oh yeah, so this is what we're talking about here. Or they'll draw out a path and it's like, oh, you can see this where this lighting went, or you can see this wasn't our first take because here's where we tried to rake the dirt out to make it look like we hadn't been there before.
Oh, haha.
So it is quite enlightening on just the troubles they went through to get the lighting right, and how this movie doesn't make sense if you look at it as far as the lighting, but why it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense because of the lighting. But like when Ray's out in the tilled field, there's so much lighting around him.
Well, yeah, in that instance, the lighting, if you look at the long shot when you see him with his car in the background and the light that you're supposed to be getting is from the headlights, if you actually look, the light is coming from the other direction. Essentially what it is with this movie, they weren't worried about, does this necessarily make sense? They were looking at it for the shot. How does it look in the shot? If it looks okay in the shot, okay.
Rule of cool.
Yeah, and there's the scene when he's walking up to the office and you see the dust pop up from the floor and everything and the light that's there. Well, you open the door and the room's dark. That light wouldn't make sense, but it also didn't help the shot.
Did you think the movie was funny?
I had some comedic moments. But I wouldn't say it was necessarily funny. I mean, Miller's Crossing also, I wouldn't say is a funny movie. It had comedic elements, but it wasn't really a funny movie.
No, that's the thing. I kind of found the entire sequence of Ray trying to get rid of the evidence is like kind of hilarious.
I don't know if I would say funny. I would say it's not the kind of funny that I would say, yeah, this is a funny movie. Like I said, there's some comedic elements, but I wouldn't say funny.
I mean, I've found reviews that say it's like full of dark humor.
Oh, yeah.
Mean, it struck me as struck playing pretty straight.
Yeah, and one of the things that Frances McDormand has said, she said it in an interview about Fargo, but the impression I got, she was kind of directing it more towards just the Coen movies themselves. The way they make movies, they're just not going and making shit up. This is all true. The reason the Coen brothers movies work is because they're true. The characters are true to character. It's true to life. This is throw a person in a situation. This is the kind of shit you get. It's not just some bonkers thing that would never happen. It's true. Whether it's an actual factual, this thing exactly happened this way, doesn't matter. This is true people.
The Coens write with a harsh sense of internal logic as the cause and effect of what their characters do and why. They don't ever manipulate their characters into doing things that are ridiculous for the sake of ridiculous. I don't think you would ever have a Coen movie where a character, like in a slasher movie, where they run up the stairs and can't get away because now they're trapped upstairs. That's not the kind of thing a Coen protagonist is going to make. It's not a mistake.
Well, there would have to be a reason for it.
It would have to be a very.
There would have to be some kind of a logical reason why they went upstairs.
Like maybe there's a gun upstairs.
Yeah. I mean, there has to be something. It's not just, oh no, let's now go upstairs.
I feel like I'm going to mention Texas Chainsaw Massacre a lot in this episode because I just got a lot of Texas Chainsaw vibes off this movie.
Because it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere?
Well, there's that, but also there's a few specific things about it that reminded me of Chainsaw.
There's a couple of things that reminded me of Evil Dead, specifically the Evil Dead shot in the front yard.
Like one thing, we're talking about the humor of the movie, and supposedly Texas Chainsaw Massacre is full of dark humor too, but I don't know. I rarely laugh when watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I didn't laugh much watching this.
Yeah, exactly. It's got comedic elements, but it's not a funny movie.
Yeah, but according to Tobe Hooper and Kim Hinkle, who wrote Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they were laughing their ass off writing the script.
Well, it's different when you're writing it than when you're seeing it. I mean, look how many people get up on stage and tell jokes and think it's the funniest thing ever because they laughed hard when they wrote it, but nobody laughs.
Yes, every comedian's worst nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, look at Pluto Nash.
Like I said, I didn't see the comedy much. I mean, Emmett Walsh is this demented Texas good old boy. He kind of just wasn't that funny to me.
Okay, the joke he tells in his car.
About his
what
the
was
guy getting
what
both
was the
hands broken.
punchline?
Your wife's really got to love you, I think. Or was that a different story?
Oh no, that's the story. But what was the punchline?
That's true love.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the joke...
When she's got to wipe your ass for you.
Yeah, the story was a friend of his broke his hand and then shortly after fell, protected his busted hand that was in a cast with his good hand, and in the process broke his other hand.
Yeah.
So he told the guy, your wife better love you because for the next 5 weeks, you can't even wipe your own ass. That's what the script says. What he says does not sound like that at all. So I turned on the captions just to make sure, am I mishearing this? And the captions say, you can't wipe your own hat. And I can understand if you listen to him when he's saying it, it does not sound like he's saying ass. You know that's what the line is. But the way he says it doesn't sound like ass. And I think the captions were going by what he was saying rather than what the script was.
So what did he say, ass or hat?
The script was ass. I'm not sure which he said, but the caption says hat. Because that's how I ended up reading the script for this, is because I heard that line and it's like, well, wait a minute, I could have sworn he said ass. And I rewound it and it's like, well, wait, no, that's not ass. And then turn the caption on and it's like, okay, now I got to find the script. Because
now I'm wondering if it's a Texas colloquialism for ass is hat.
Well, I looked it up.
Sit on your hat, pal.
Well, I looked up the line to begin with, just trying to figure, did I mishear it, or is it some kind of a saying, or is there some kind of something there other than maybe mishearing or wrong captions? And nothing showed up at all about that. So then I found the script and I found that spot in the script, and knowing that the Coen brothers movies, every single thing I've ever found has said that the characters or all the actors pretty much always stick word for word to the script, to the point to where even in Fargo, there was a point where when the guy's looking for the pancakes house, he thought it was a typo. And when he says it, next thing you know, he's like, wait, what were you saying? And he's like, where's the pancake house? And it's like, that's not what the script says. It's like, oh, I thought it was a typo. No, there's no typos in the script.
According to the quote on IMDb is, I hope your wife really loves you because for the next 5 weeks, you can't even wipe your own goddamn ass.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's the quote.
That's the test.
And that's you know what he's supposed to be saying, but it doesn't quite come out as ass. But it's like, okay, it could just be like the accent that he's using, the way he's talking doesn't quite sound like it. So I turned the caption on and the caption said hat. And I was just, what the hell does that mean?
Maybe that's a Texas colloquialism. Sit on your hat. Maybe ass and hat are interchangeable.
Yeah, but he's talking about wiping it.
Wiping hat.
Like I said, the only thing I could think of is they were going by what they were hearing.
It would make sense that cowboys would, when they're working with cattle, they would maybe get feces or shit, as it is called, sprayed on their hats, and they would have to wipe their hat off. I don't know. I'm making this up.
Okay? Yeah, I think you're going a little too far. I'm happy with they just misdid the captions.
Probably. We need a Texan to clear this up and say, ain't nobody ever called their damn ass their hat. And I'd be like, okay, well, now we know. Who the hell thought of that? I did. Well, you're a fucking idiot. That'll be my conversation with a Texas cowboy, asking him the question about this movie. What the hell damn movie is this? And say it's Blood Simple. Oh, by the Coens? Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, so anyway.
Well,
yeah, I just think it was one of those weird spots in the subtitles that they just screwed up. It's not uncommon for there to be errors in subtitles.
I think when people describe the movie as a comedy, what they're really talking about is that it's kind of a farce because of all the misunderstandings that go on throughout the film.
Possibly.
Well, because there's at one point a character is convinced another character has killed somebody, and they immediately go into hide the evidence mode.
So basically, what the movie is it opens up with two people in a Fiat.
Okay, they're supposed to be driving in the rain, aren't they?
Yeah. So what it was, they were sitting in a Fiat with someone sitting on the roof sprinkling with the sprinkler spraying water on the windshield in a garage, and someone would run by with a light on, turn the light off, and go and run by again, so it looked like they were driving down the street at night in the rain.
Well, it worked. It tricked me.
And then they get out of the car at one point, and now it's, I want to say it's a Volvo, and then they show a longer shot, and it's an Oldsmobile. So in the first few minutes of this movie, he's got 3 different cars.
That's called guerrilla filmmaking.
They needed them to sit closer together, so they chose a Fiat, and then they needed this. But anyway, so it opens up with 2 people in a car driving in the rain. Not a whole lot of conversation. She's the first lines we get.
Plenty of conversation. What are you talking about?
Well,
it's because I like you.
Yeah, I mean, there's conversation, nice. But it's not a very wordy conversation.
Well, it's
but the first line really gives you an idea of what you're dealing with.
You mean the narration?
And I was worried about if you were going to figure that as a first line or not. The first spoken line that we have from a character that's not a narrator. But yeah, it really kind of gives you the idea of what you're dealing with as far as character-wise. The first line is, gave me a little pearl-handled 38 for our first anniversary.
Uh-huh.
I figured I'd better leave before I use it on him. I just don't know how you can stand him.
Well, I'm an employee. I ain't married to him.
Exactly.
And
that's how the movie opens and tells you everything you need to know.
It's about these, and like she's leaving her husband, and he's driving her to where she needs to go.
And the husband, his idea of an anniversary present, a first anniversary present, is a pearl-handled 38, and he's the kind of person that would make you want to use it on him.
He sounds like a real card.
So yeah, we get that. We've figured out what's going on, and he tells her that he likes her.
Yeah, he tells her he likes her, and our happy couple who has just confessed their attraction to one another, they wind up in a motel room for the night. But in the meantime, they don't realize they're stalked by a VW little bug, and
they as they're driving down the road, she yells at him to stop the car. He slams on the brakes. There's a Volkswagen behind him that also stops. And he's like, do you recognize a car? And she says, no. And as it drives by, you see a guy in a cowboy hat in this bug that drives by. There is our Volkswagen Cowboy.
Yep. And they go inside the motel room. And we have a very brief scene of them enjoying one another naked in the bed. And we are not blessed with any young Frances McDormand nudity that's explicit or graphic, anything like that. Because I checked. Did you check? Yes, you did. You know you did.
Oh, I thought it was so blatant that it wasn't going to be shown by the way they lit everything and the way the covers were that there wasn't any point in even checking.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, it was just a quick love scene, and then it goes from there to, I believe, to the bar.
Well, basically what the movie is, you have a pretty straightforward adultery and murder thriller that gets turned on its head and pulled sideways. And you have Emmett Walsh as the private detective, or Lauren Visser, according to the script, and his lighter as this ultimate amoral sleazebag, anything for hire bastard.
Or as I like to call him, Volkswagen Cowboy.
Volkswagen Cowboy. Maybe he's a private detective. He wants a car that's nondescript so he can tail people.
Yeah, so you get one that everybody's always looking out for, because you know how many people are looking out for punch bugs, and one that's not known to be the quietest thing. You get a loud car that people look out for.
Well, maybe it's a hide in plain sight kind of thing.
But anyway,
or it's just a very awkward choice for a car. And this is not the only movie where we see in the Coen's oeuvre.
You really like that word, don't you?
I do.
You use it a lot, and yet you don't know what it is.
It means body of work.
Well, you know what it means, but you don't know how to say it.
I don't. I really need to look that up.
Yeah, if you're going to use a word, you should know how to say it.
I should.
But yeah, we find out that he is a private detective that has been hired by Nick Tortelli to follow his wife around to find out who she's been sleeping with.
And it's not Nick Tortelli. His name is Julian Marty.
Then he's handed pictures, and he's pissed that the guy took the pictures. Because, you told me where they were. Why'd you take the pictures?
I figure it's a little bonus or something, they said. Or a fringe benefit,
a courtesy, or I don't know I don't remember what he was saying, but basically it came across like he took pleasure in it.
Now let's not spoil the movie for them, Grim. We've done that far too many times.
Well, I'm trying to add some context to what we're talking about.
Well, all right. How far are we going on the context?
Just the general idea of the movie. So we find out that he's been hired by Nick Tortelli to follow his wife, Blue Eyes, find out who she's been with, and now he sees in the picture that it's his employee, not John Ritter.
Ray. Marty, Abby, and Ray. But okay. And what does it say?
And I have a feeling I'm going to drive you nuts with this one.
And do you know what it says on the detective's lighter besides his name?
Wasn't it like something of the year?
Elks Man of the Year.
Yeah. And it was some kind of man of the year. Yeah, so anyway, he's got this fancy silver lighter that he uses.
It's gold to me.
Oh, it's a fancy silver lighter.
Okay. With engraved stuff on it.
And a fancy engraved silver lighter.
Zippo lighter.
Yes.
Which might be a reference to Strangers on a Train.
You're really trying to ruin all my connections here before I even get to any of that, aren't you?
No, I was just calling the lighter out.
You're trying to let all my secrets out.
I'm not letting any secrets out. You ain't told me none of your secrets.
Well, I'm not going to have to tell him if you keep spoiling them.
I'm the conductor. I'm supposed to know some things.
You gotta conduct something.
Yeah, darn nugget.
So anyway, so we find out that he's been hired, and Volkswagen Cowboy's wanting to have more of a relationship with Nick Tortelli business-wise, and he's like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, and he says, like, the Greeks would cut off the heads of messengers who brought bad news. Well, there's laws against that in this state, pal.
Yeah. So he essentially kicks him out, and not John Ritter and Nick Tortelli have a conversation.
That's Ray and Marty.
Find out they don't want to have anything to do with each other. And Nick Tortelli says, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I'm pissed off. I'm going to come in and try and kill you, going for her first. And that might have been his only plan. I don't know, because that's as far as it went. It didn't go right. So now he goes and hires Volkswagen Cowboy to kill Blue Eyes and not John Ritter.
Ray and Abby. Marty hires the detective to murder Abby and Ray.
Isn't that what I said?
In a roundabout way, yes. I just felt like translating it for our viewers who aren't keeping track of your
and our listeners
nicknames. What?
And our listeners.
That's what I meant. It's our listeners. We love our listeners. Thank you for listening.
Yes, and we love our viewers, even though our viewers are just the people on Facebook that just really only listen to us anyway.
Yes.
Or not on Facebook, sorry, on YouTube. Our viewers are on YouTube listening to us instead of watching us.
Well, I just don't think we're camera ready yet, Grim. I'm sorry. I just I don't know if we're.
Well, no, because again, we need all these likes, subscribes, comments, shares, tell people about us, favorite, all that kind of stuff, so we can get people to say, hey, maybe we'll give them some support and sponsors and all that good stuff so we can buy better equipment so we can actually use, I don't know, better sounding mics and better cameras. But anyway, so yeah, that's basically the plot. That's kind of what it is. And things go wrong because sideways. Coen Brothers movies are famous for high ambition crime with inept criminals.
Yes, they are. Most famously, I think Fargo was probably one of the prime examples of that.
Big Lebowski.
William H. Macy's character.
Miller's Crossing, kind of in a way.
I thought you had some pretty ept criminals in that movie.
Except for Bernie.
Bernie knew what he was doing.
To an extent, and then he got a little bit too big for his britches.
Well, that's just playing the game.
Yeah, he wasn't ready to play that game. He went further than he was ready for. So he had ambitions he wasn't.
I think
he wasn't ready for.
And I think he underestimated the enemies he made.
Meaning he wasn't ready for it.
Well, that's
so yeah. In Coen movies, that's a standard.
You give Bernie an angle, he plays it. That's just how he is.
You got to do what you got to do. But anyway, that's a whole nother
prohibition. Movie. It's not Chinatown. There wasn't any Chinatown in Miller's Crossing. It was all It was all Irish and Italians.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Chinatown.
No, there's the famous line. It's Chinatown. Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Yeah, and that ain't that movie.
You hate that movie?
No, I said that ain't that movie.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say it's Chinatown for Bernie, but that really doesn't apply.
Not at all.
But
so yeah, like I said, that basically that's the plot, and the rest of it is just how it unfolds in odd ways. You get some misunderstandings, you get some double crossings, you get some live burials.
You get a live burial.
Yeah, which that was Joel and Ethan Coen.
It was?
At one point, yes. From the point when you could no longer see Nick Tortelli's face, that was Ethan underground, and it was Joel's legs in the jeans.
Ah, well, that'll make me want to watch that scene again.
And there's an interesting story on that, too. Apparently, they were in Barry Sonnenfeld's backyard when they did it, and it was basically just the three of them to film that part. They had, like, when the ground was moving, they were like, okay, well, now we need a shot of it not moving. So they kept trying to tell him to be still. And he's like, what do you need? So they ended up clearing a little spot so they could see him. And it's like, we just need it to be still. And he says, well, if it has to be still, do I still have to be in here? And Barry's like, me being me, I'd be like, yeah, just be still for a moment. But Joel being the softy that he is, it's like, well, I guess not. So they had to take the time to dig all the dirt up and get him out and then put all the dirt back and get the mound right again so they can film another shot of just still dirt.
Well, you don't want to bury someone alive and have them die on accident. So, I mean, they were cautious. I can't blame them there.
Oh, yeah. And I can't blame him for wanting to be out and everything. It's just, I thought it was interesting that he's like, well, if it has to be still, do I have to be in here? And one of them's like, yeah, just be still for a minute so we can get the shot. Then we'll get you out of there.
Yes, Butter, shut up and just lay there. Okay, that didn't work.
No, not quite.
So they tell him to be still.
Yeah, that's what I would have said. Just be still.
Just be still.
But instead, they took the time and dug them all up.
It's well, I did not know that. That's some fun trivia.
Yeah, that's part of the interview commentary thing that was on that. They had talked about that.
I think there's something kind of mean-spirited about Blood Simple. It's a very dark movie, like kind of like the way Pasolini's Salò or maybe Fulci's New York Ripper is dark. There's not a lot of there's not many happy endings for the characters in it.
No, and that's a very interesting comparison. I don't know if I would have gone there, but okay.
You got this Texas good old boy and girl characters are all, you kind of get the, I kind of get this feeling like they were all sort of naive and aw shucks in a lot of ways, like the characters aren't on the joke of what's going on for them. Like in a sense, like maybe Joel and
nobody
Ethan Coen
really talked much to each other except for, well, Blue Eyes has a lot of personality. So
she was the healthiest person a psychiatrist had ever met.
Exactly. So she did talk quite a bit at points, but it wasn't really like people were saying what was going on. And there was a lot of things going on that's like, okay, if you just said something, then this all could have been avoided.
Yes, it all could have been avoided. And that's another thing I think the Coens don't do is they don't do characters explaining the situation to the viewer, really. I mean, they kind of did it in Big Lebowski where Lebowski solves the mystery a little bit.
Oh, you mean how things kind of just end ambiguously? Like what's going to happen?
A little bit.
Well, I mean, there are, like, Fargo had the whole money MacGuffin thing, but yeah, they have a tendency of, like I said, the $1 million MacGuffin. Did the dude ever get his rug back? What happened with the Big Lebowski? Did he get arrested? What happened with all that money that from there? I mean, there's another $1 million MacGuffin in Big Lebowski. So they have a lot of just ambiguous things. I mean, they do kind of wrap some things up.
I think they wrap up the arcs for the characters, really. Like Margie in Fargo, she proves herself to be a very able detective throughout the film.
Yes, she does a very good job.
Yes, also played by Frances McDormand, and I think that was one of her big. Yeah,
she ended up winning the Oscar for that.
She won an Oscar for that, and I think that put her into the mainstream a lot more.
Yeah, and when she won the speech she gave, she said she specifically had things she wanted to say, and it was basically all about how the Coens aren't low-budget movie makers because they can't do good movies. It's by choice because they have had complete creative control over their work, and that means that they have to get lower budgets. That's right. The only way they can do it. So they sacrifice the budget in order to have control, in order to put out the story that they want to put out.
I think they had a bit of a higher budget with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they had a pretty big budget with that one, but the soundtrack, I think, if it wasn't for the soundtrack, the movie probably would have done a lot worse because the soundtrack skyrocketed and really helped ticket sales.
Helped create the bluegrass movement we have today. We're still dealing with that.
Hey, I like the music in that, so.
Yes, the music in the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou movie is fine, but
I like bluegrass. So,
but I don't care for Monsters and Men, and they're a bluegrass group, and it's like I have to listen to them and the Lumineers on the radio thanks to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou.
Change stations.
I do.
Well, then you don't got to listen to them.
And then I change the station, and it's just Pink Floyd. I've heard a million times, and I'm just like, darn it, why didn't I put my phone on?
Well, that sounds like a you problem.
It is a me problem.
And it also sounds like we're talking about something that's way off your favorite word.
Topic. One of the things that sort of struck me as sort of hilarious in the movie, and even though, like I've said several times, I didn't really get a lot of comedy out of the film, was when Abby, or Blue Eyes, as you call her, is hanging out with Ray. Not John
You realize why I call her that, though, right?
Because she has blue eyes?
Well, yes, but there's many scenes in this movie where she is lit that just makes her eye, and she has just gorgeous, deep blue eyes, and they're lit to where it just makes them pop. And looking at this movie, I can see why making that movie and watching her every day, I'd want to marry her too.
Barbara Crampton, the Scream Queen, went on to marry the cameraman that was filming her in Reanimator, I think.
Well, and then we also have Night of the Demons with
Linnea Quigley marrying the makeup guy, who first met her when he had to take a chest mold of her
when he had
torso.
to slather stuff on her tits.
Yeah.
That was love at first grope.
Love at first makeup check. No, there's a scene where Abby is hanging out with Ray and she goes, Marty's anal. And Ray's just like,
you don't say. It's very just like, oh, you don't say.
Yeah, you don't say. But she makes this such a big deal about, like, what the fuck do Abby and Ray think anal means? I mean, what is so damning about being anal? I mean, does Marty, just because, like, Marty has OCD or something?
Well, I think part of that was they're kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Well, I can't say out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, there are no major metropolitan centers in Texas.
I mean, it wasn't like they were in the middle of like Houston or anything. They were kind of out there. And in comparison to that versus, say, California, at that time, things like somebody saying they're anal and talking about like a mental thing, and possibly even just because of how, okay, I know him. That doesn't sound right for him. But I could see how that could be an issue where California is like, people got so many issues out here that, okay, yeah, we've known that one. What's new?
Yeah, but and that's another thing. I feel like the Coens. It's like with Raising Arizona in their next movie, they kind of found their comedic voice a lot more. Okay, and in this, hold on.
Raising Arizona is a comedy that they've not really done again. That was more like a
I would argue that Burn After Reading was a comedy.
It was more like a cartoony comic book-ish kind of comedy.
I would argue that Burn After Reading is a nice companion piece to Raising Arizona.
Possibly. I have not seen that one yet. I do know that is the one that took inspiration from the guy that built one of the rigs in this movie.
Really?
Yes. So there's a scene when Blue Eyes is standing in the bar and she's kind of putting things together in her head. And it goes from this long one cut, just looking at her as she falls back into bed and just kind of turns her head. And it's one shot, and they made this rig so as she would fall back, the bed would come up to her. Mm-hmm. So that way they didn't have to, because this is before CG and all that other shit, and they didn't want to have any cuts to try and pull that effect off.
It was a neat effect.
So the way they did it was to have the rig so it would do that, and to do that cost quite a bit. And there's one of the guy that ended up building it for them told them this story about he saw this chair thing or swing thing, but basically he saw like a sex swing chair in the back of Hustler magazine, and it was like $200 or some shit. And he's like, I can make that myself for a few bucks. So he made one of those for his wife, and then was telling them this story about making all that. And he kind of showed him pictures, and they're like, that's kind of like the rig we need for this. So can you build that for us? So they go, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And they ended up, I can't remember what movie it might have been, Burn After Reading, but they ended up using that rig again in another one of their movies. But the idea of him just building sex toys in his basement is what inspired that character.
The character in Burn After Reading.
I believe is the movie, because that's the one where he makes sex toys in his basement, right?
With Frances McDormand, yes.
Yeah. So that was the inspiration for that, was the guy that built the rig for her to fall into bed.
Well, look, I was just going to say, with the Raising Arizona, I feel like when you watch Raising Arizona, there's kind of an affection for the characters, and the fact that they're rural Southwestern characters, and with their idiosyncrasies and quirks. But you feel like the directors, the writers are on the side of Nick Cage and Holly Hunter in that movie. Like they aren't judging them. In this movie, I feel like the characters are being judged in a sense.
I didn't get the feeling they were being judged. And looking at any of the movies, I don't think any of them ever come off like they're being judged, other than judged by the individual characters in the movies. I never get the impression that the movie is leaning one way or the other to try and fall on the side of one person or the other. I think for the most part, they leave it more up to the audience to figure out who do you root for.
Well, there are some very morally ambiguous characters in the Coens films. For me, I just didn't get any feeling of like these characters were with Raising Arizona and Fargo, you get more of a feeling that these are whole characters that were written with the kind of breath of life. Whereas with these characters in Blood Simple, maybe the Coens hadn't quite gotten hadn't quite finessed their style to the point where the characters really pop off the page as much. It was their first movie, yes, but I feel like the Coens had a bit of a mean-spirited streak in them when they were writing these characters, and sort of portraying them as dumb yokels.
At the time too, that was, like I said, it was their first movie, and Joel had Joel had been working with Sam Raimi to edit Evil Dead. Mm-hmm. So he picked up a lot from Sam in the making of Evil Dead.
Yes, I think Sam taught him how to finance a film from just taking like a short film around to show as like a preview of what the directors can do.
Yeah, and they even said that's a little trick we learned from Sam.
But that's how they got their first film.
And the shot when she shows up, or when he shows up and drags her outside, and the camera just flies into their faces, you can't look at that shot and not see a Raimi influence. And then listen to them talk, and they say, yeah, basically it was a camera on a board, and we ran up on Raimi's shaky cam.
Yeah, that's what they call it, the shaky cam.
It's the poor man steady cam.
Yeah.
So, and they even admit that a lot of what they got for that was influenced from him. And I can see how having that darker look and the influence from Sam Raimi, and it being their first movie, not having as fleshed out characters and stories as the later movies would end up having.
All right, then. So we're in somewhat agreement.
Yeah. And I think, though, that you don't really need more of a character with these.
No, I think the plot takes
it's a simple enough story. You don't need much background.
Simple story, my ass.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a simple story that has a lot of weird twists and turns, but it's not like you need a lot of character background to understand what's going on.
No, Coens are not ones to waste time on, I don't think there's ever been a Coen movie where you see like what the protagonist was like in childhood.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, you get some, in Oh Brother, you get some backstory to the three interspersed here and there, but you don't get a whole lot.
No, you don't.
Lebowski, you don't get a whole lot other than Walter was in Vietnam.
And that the dude was involved in student movements.
He spent most of his time in college occupying various administration buildings, smoking a lot of Thai stick.
Helped write the Port Huron Statement.
Yeah. So you get little bits and pieces, but you don't really get a whole lot. You get just enough to where you know the character enough for the story to work.
Exactly.
And I don't think you really need to know much about these characters for the story to work.
Not only that, but I could imagine the Coens being the economical writers they were, and trying to display their strengths as much as possible in their first movie to make it the best movie they could and experiences they were at the time. I wonder if they decided to forego character development or
I wonder what happened to Opal.
Action. If what?
I wonder what happened to Opal.
Oh, the dog?
Yeah. What happened to Opal?
I would imagine that Abby got her in the end.
Maybe. But how long has Opal been in the house with no one there?
In fact, well, that's the thing. Didn't she move out and Opal was there? Okay, we last saw Opal in Ray's house.
No, we last see Opal in Nick Tortelli's car.
Okay.
Because when he shows up, drags her outside, she breaks his finger, kicks him in the balls. He throws up. We hear Barry Sonnenfeld throw up instead. And he's even credited as his vomit sound or stand-in or whatever.
Vomit chimp.
Yeah, he's a sympathetic vomiter. So when he had to vomit, even the fake vomiting was making him throw up. So one of the Coens said, just mic him up instead, because at least he's doing it for real, so we can get the real sound.
Yeah, keep puking, Barry. Keep puking. Yeah, that's good.
I think he said
that's good stuff.
I think he said on making this movie, he threw up like 18 times just from what they were doing.
We need more, Barry. Now smell it so you can puke more.
But yeah, so that happens. He gets into his car. Opal comes running out. He floors it. And then not John Ritter says, like to have seen his face when he found the dead end.
Yeah.
Which
people, you hear him screeching his tires and turning around.
Yeah. And people apparently know where he lives. It's not like that's the only time anyone's been there or the only time anyone shows up at his house throughout the movie. And yet it's not the only time we hear people flooring it to take off from his place and then finding out, shit, this is a dead end and having to turn around.
Yes, Maurice does it later too, I think.
Yeah, bartender guy that is embarrassed about preaching about cigarettes while he lights one.
And there's a lot of moving ceiling fans on Hot Texas
That
Nights.
looked like it threw you off a little.
No, I don't remember the scene. But also, I wonder if this was a reference to some sort of film noir film that I can't, whose name I can't recall at the moment. But I got the feeling that, I don't know, maybe it was, were there ceiling fans in Out of the Past that, like slow moving ceiling fans on Hot Texas Nights or something like that? I get the feeling that was a clear film reference that if I were
I don't know if it would be a clear film reference to a specific film, because ceiling fans, especially in any movies that take place in Texas, ceiling fans are a common thing. It's like, okay, I'm watching a slasher movie. That means the one that shows her tits first is she's gonna die. The one that trips while running away, okay, they're gonna die. Things we know, okay, it's a movie in Texas. We're gonna have some kind of a shot of ceiling fans.
I did not know that, because at one point we get a montage of the three main characters in the movie all laying down staring at ceiling fans.
Well,
I think Marty's looking. I think Marty's looking. Marty has a ceiling fan in his office, and he's rarely seen outside of his office.
He's looking at the ceiling fan. Not John Ritter is looking at shadows of the trees because the man refuses to close his blinds.
Yeah, that's
and Blue Eyes. I don't know. I think she might have been looking at a fan, but her face was lit different. But I really like the way they did that editing for that montage too. And with the way the music was and everything. I really like the way they did that scene.
Oh, and did you know that the soundtrack incorporated themes from one of the oldest pieces of music in the world?
No, I did not. I know. Yes, I like this soundtrack much better. Well, I think this soundtrack fit much better than Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, I found the music for Miller's Crossing to be a bit too maudlin.
Yeah, Miller's Crossing, and I believe I said it before, Miller's Crossing, the music, it was beautiful music. I loved the music, but there was times when the music was just a little too slow for the scene, and it just seemed out of place. But it could have been that knowing what that tune was and knowing what it was about could have made it more appropriate. But without having that knowledge, just hearing the music, it's like, okay, yeah, it's beautiful music, but it just doesn't seem to fit the action that's going on. Whereas this one, the music, when it was slow, it felt right. When it was faster, it felt right. The different changes, everything felt right with the music on this one.
I know that I get the feeling right now as we talk about this, where we criticize the Carter Burwell's choices as a score in Miller's Crossing, there's probably a super Coen fan out there who's like, you guys are idiots.
I'm sure there is. Idiots. And like I said, the music was wonderful, and that's why I was saying how I changed it. I don't want to say I didn't like the music in that, because I did like the music. I just thought the slower music on some of the scenes felt weird. But without having the context of knowing what that music actually was, that could be the reason why. Because sometimes the tune could sound one way, but if you know what it is, it could have some dark hidden thing that knowing that tune and what it actually means attached to the scene, okay, now it has a different meaning. And I don't have that knowledge. I'm just a schlub watching a movie.
Well, there is an ancient song performed in Bali by two choruses called the Balinese Monkey Dance, and it involves men shouting one word back at each other. It's a kachak, kachak, chak, 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 like that. And they one side of one chorus sings that as furiously as they can at the other side, and the other side answers with the same word, and they just scream chak 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 chaka 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 like that at each other. And apparently Carter Burwell took inspiration from that and incorporated it into part of the soundtrack for this movie.
Oh, I was going to say, what the hell does that have to do with anything? But okay, you brought it around. I was lost there for a minute.
One of the oldest pieces of music in the world is kachak.
Okay.
It was also incorporated into a Mr. Bungle song called Goodbye Sober Day, if you ever want to experience a Mr. Bungle song.
What the hell's that?
It's a band called Mr. Bungle.
Oh.
You know who Mike Patton from Faith No More is?
I know Faith No More.
Okay, well, the lead singer of Faith No More is a guy named Mike Patton.
Okay.
And he has another band called Mr. Bungle.
Oh.
And they're far out.
If you say so. I have no idea. I didn't like Faith No More.
You should check out Mr. Bungle while you're limber sometime.
I've been finding kaiju movies when in that state of mind have been very interesting.
I can imagine.
Anyway, do you know how they made the incinerator look so big?
By having little people throw things into it?
Yep.
The
incinerator they had was kind of a small dumpster size, or dumpster style, not size, a small dumpster style incinerator. But to make it look bigger, they had to get short people to stand in front of it.
Movie magic. What do you think were the horror elements in the movie? I thought there was the horror POV shots of the detective stalking around the outside of Ray's house, or things like that. I think that was, you could say that you could trace that in a direct line back to Halloween and Black Christmas as being a cinematic technique to induce fear.
Well, define horror element.
I think the POV shot.
Because realistically, her waking up in a panic, thinking that she hears him in the house after he's already broke in, there's a horror element. It's just a different kind of horror. Are you thinking horror like a standard horror movie thing? Like, that's what I mean. Define horror element.
Well, that's the thing. Here we could get into thriller versus horror, and what's the difference between a thriller movie versus a horror movie.
And that's something that we talked about before when I was talking about Psycho. And to me, Psycho it's not a horror, it's a thriller. But yet,
but it has horrifying elements.
It is a horror movie. Like Silence of the Lambs is a thriller, not a horror, yet it's still a horror movie.
I think thriller and horror merge and they overlap a good deal.
Yeah,
it's a simple fact.
And it's a different type of horror.
It's more grounded.
Yeah, and to me, it's something that has more of a mental aspect rather than just the visceral, in-your-face, blood and guts, knife flying at you, whatever.
It's a more cerebral approach.
Yeah, and like this, definitely I could see a lot of horror elements in this. Same way as Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, Fatal Attraction, Hand That Rocks a Cradle.
Cape Fear.
Yeah, these are all movies that definitely have a lot of horror elements, but they're more, I personally classify them more as thrillers because it's for me, it's a way of keeping them separated in my head about like, what is more of a plausible, real world, something this could happen versus, Jason's not going to keep
Freddy
coming
Krueger
back.
walking down an alley with long arms.
Yeah.
Or versus a slasher killer like going on a rampage in a camp.
Well, no, you'd have to, because Sleepaway Camp, I could see that.
You could see that happening.
Somebody snapping and killing a bunch of people? Yeah.
Well, yeah, in our modern times, somebody snapping and killing a bunch of people is sadly in the news pretty often.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could see how something like that, but it's when it turns into, okay, well, yeah, we've put an axe through him, we've put a machete through him, we've put 400,000 rounds through him, we've blown him up, we've done this, and he keeps coming back. That's a horror. That's not thriller. You're not dealing with shit that could happen. Like the first Friday the 13th would be a thriller. I
like to think of one of the key differences for me between thriller and horror is just to use Nightmare on Elm Street as an example. You could have had Nancy. Her plan was to pull Freddy out of the dream world, right? And he'd be mortal in the dream world.
Yes.
Okay. So why didn't she just keep a gun by the side of her bed for when she woke up?
Did she have one?
That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make
that's the point. If she didn't have one, that's why she didn't have one by the bed.
No, my point is that in thrillers, characters have guns. In horror movies, they don't. It's very rare that you see the victims going to the police and getting help, or being armed and being able to defend themselves adequately from their attackers. Whereas in a thriller, you might have a scene where they're at a gun range learning to shoot from a private detective or something like that.
I'm trying to remember the guns in Hand That Rocks a Cradle.
A thriller.
Yeah. And you said in the thrillers they had guns. I'm trying to remember the guns in that movie. I don't remember them.
Well,
I know
it's not a hard and fast rule that's true of every thriller.
Psycho, the detective, I believe, had one. But I don't remember, well, obviously the cop that pulled her over in the beginning had one, but I don't remember any guns anywhere else, and anywhere that would be out of place, or it's like, yeah, the detective might have had one. The cop is going to have one because he's a cop, but they're not characters that really make it. Well, the cop's not a character that really makes a difference. So it's not like that gun would be in play anywhere.
A lot of times too, I think with horror movies, like if you're watching a horror movie in a theater, you might have an idiot somewhere in the crowd who's going to shout, "This movie's stupid. If that guy came at me, I'd just shoot him," and be like,
you can have that in a horror. You can have that in a thriller. Have that in comedies.
You can have that in comedies, yes. But no, in some horror movies, like I would say, yeah, go ahead, shoot at Pinhead, see what happens. You think Pinhead's going to care that you shoot him?
Probably not.
No, he'll
laugh at it.
I think he was shot in Hellraiser 3 and he spit out the bullets. And then in Hellraiser 4, he was zapped with a laser gun and it just bounced off of him.
Anyway.
But back to the topic. Another thing that struck me is like maybe a reference to Texas Chainsaw Massacre was this remember when Ray's driving down the road and you hear this preacher on the radio talking about astrology and like planets lining up?
Yep.
Okay, well, that was
just... And then he got tired
of
it and changed the station.
You got tired of it and he changed the station. But that kind of just struck me as kind of like maybe a reference to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where all five of the five youths who encountered a nightmare that day were driving down the road in their VW minibus, and one of them was reading out of an astrology book and saying how...
Or it could be something that's kind of a common late night radio thing in Texas.
Or yeah, I believe in the credits they even credit the real Reverend. It was like a real radio personality in Texas, I think, who actually got a credit in the film.
They took inspiration for this movie from all over the place, from The Shining, from a bunch of different things. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some kind of nod somewhere to Chainsaw Massacre, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's not. I mean, it's many things.
Yeah, it's iffy.
Or influence. So many things had influence on this movie that it would surprise me if they could remember all the different influences.
Yes, and I think that's one of the things that hardcore cinephiles love about Coen films is they're able to just watch them and just tick off the references. Like, that's a shot from Out of the Past. That's from Maltese Falcon. That's from Citizen Kane. Things like that. I think
one of the things that people find enjoyable about watching multiple Coen movies is connecting the movies in the Coen universe, because there's so many things that this talks about something in this movie and that talks about something in this movie. I know at one point there's reference to in a newspaper, there's a reference to people dying in a hotel fire, which happens in another movie. And there's the Barton Arms in Miller's Crossing. There's so many things that connect their different movies together that kind of becomes a game in itself.
But how do you connect it to, let's say, Fifth Element? How do you connect this to Fifth Element? Okay. Or should we save that for another time?
Well, my thought are that was brilliant.
I cannot speak ill of somebody who stumbles over their own words. I do it so much myself that it would be ridiculous.
No, anyway, so I have made it a point to talk about how I can connect every movie from Strangers on a Train all the way through to this, our 10th movie, Blood Simple.
And should we save that for its own episode, do you think? Or should you give us the whole reveal now?
I think we've come up with some plans for future stuff from the sounds of it that's going to, I think, add quite a bit to our show. Mm-hmm. I think if we keep this connection thing to its own little thing, what we'll do is we'll have on our next episode will be this, and we'll have a nice little wrap up of our 10 movies so far, what we think of everything, and give you an idea of some of the ideas we have for what's coming up.
It sounds like a plan. And what the fuck is it with the detective's Russia talk?
Oh, in the very beginning when he's talking about how Russia...
I guess over in Russia they got a system where everyone pulls for everybody, but I don't know.
I just know about Texas.
Yeah, is that just him? Like
I don't know what that's referring to, what it's supposed to mean.
1984 Cold War Reagan. I doubt if you wanted to get political or philosophical about it, I could imagine it's just him ruminating about how the world might be different in some other places, but here it's every man for himself. And
I mean, that's kind of how it sounds. It's just like, yeah, they talk about that, but I just know what we deal with here, and here this is what it is.
Doesn't he mention Russia again to somebody though?
I don't know.
I think he does.
It's possible. Like I said, I've seen this movie a lot lately. But this isn't one like some of the others that I really remember everybody's dialogue as much as some of the others. Because there's so much going on and so little said that I'm more like, I just kind of sit there and let the story unfold for me. It's not like some of the movies like with Miller's Crossing, the dialogue was considerably more than what's in this.
Indeed.
And it was entertaining to listen to. Big Lebowski, the dialogue is entertaining.
And Big Lebowski, especially when Steve Buscemi's on screen, however briefly.
Yeah. And, well, with him in Fargo, and he pretty much never shuts up.
Yeah.
And in Miller's Crossing,
Peter Stormare never says a word.
In Miller's Crossing, he's only in it for one scene, which basically amounts to nothing more than a cameo. It's the first movie he's done with the Coens, and the reason he got the part was he was the only one that could say the lines that fast.
It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah. And they didn't realize it until afterwards that somebody brought it up to him that, you guys keep killing him. And every time you kill him, the body gets smaller.
What would you change about the movie?
I don't know. I think it's one of those movies where you can tell it's a low budget, but it doesn't hurt the movie. I think the low budget helps it.
Yeah.
It gives it more of a raw, everyday feel.
Yeah. I mean, Ray's place looks like a place, like a real place someone would live in.
Except for shut the fucking blinds, people.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
When you get a new place and you got giant windows, put curtains up or something. This movie is a great example of why you close your curtains.
That could have solved some issues.
Yeah.
I can't think of much I would change about the movie either. I mean, maybe explain what the hell Abby thinks anal means.
Well,
if anyone listens to comments about this, I'm sure they can explain it to me. I have heard of anal retentiveness.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure she kind of realized that.
I mean, to me, being anal is such a benign thing that Abby revealing it like some dark secret was kind of bonkers to me.
Like I said, I think it's just more at that period of time, being in the middle of nowhere and that kind of a character, it just seemed weird. And it could have been that they found it weird because it was something that he admitted to. Like it was, okay, that guy never will say that he's got a problem.
I think in 1984, it was shot in 1982. It was completed in 1983. It was released in 1984. So I think Freudian pop psychology still had a pretty big hold on the public imagination. So I guess maybe just anal retentiveness is what they called OCD back then or something.
Yeah. And like I said, it could just be just the location they were in, the time period, and the character that seems like, wow, I can't believe that he's that way. You'd never think it by watching him or listening to him or whatever. Or it could be you would never think that he would admit to it because of his ego or something. Who knows? But yeah, what would I change? I would have liked to see John Ritter in that role. Not that I would necessarily change it because I think he did fine. It's just there's so many scenes when I see him and I think he kind of looks like John Ritter, and it makes me want to see John Ritter do that role just to see if it could have been as good.
I think the character of Ray actually kind of looked more like a bargain basement Clint Eastwood in a lot of ways. I think his haircut and his facial expressions were very Clint Eastwood inspired from what I remember of the movie. I mean, maybe if they just if they just had him squint a little more and given him more of a wrinkly forehead, it would have been like Clint Eastwood Jr.
I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of shots when he looked a lot like John Ritter or had a resemblance to him.
Maybe a mix of John Ritter and Lance Henriksen.
That's not even a picture I want.
No, okay.
Yeah, I don't want that mental picture.
The train is coming to a stop, though, and it's time to say goodbye here in the movie car. We hope everyone out there in podcast land was able to get a little bit of new appreciation for the movie we talked about just now.
That was a question I had, too.
Oh, what was that?
Why is it for the movie we talked about just now instead of just and then saying the movie?
That's a good idea.
That's been bugging me. It's like, why did you choose that? And it's almost like, you know how like if you do like a form letter or something and it's printed out, there's always the spaces where like the parentheses and it says your name or business and you're supposed to fill in those. It was almost like you created that and you left that for yourself to know that's where I put in the movie name, and you just keep forgetting to put in the movie name and reading it as the movie we just talked about.
We hope everyone out there in podcast land was able to get a little bit of a new appreciation for Blood Simple.
Great movie.
Which is the movie we covered just now. Anyway, thanks to everyone who listened and downloaded. We love you, all of you.
Yeah, don't forget, like, subscribe, share, comment, heart, star.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, tell your friends. Tell your enemies.
Comment, criticize.
Tell your parents. Tell your siblings, tell your children. Well, maybe not well, depending on how old your children are.
We want you to act out there, our listeners, we want you to act like we're the top of the pyramid, and each of you has to find two people that
if each of you find two people and then
they
each of those
find
two people,
then no.
Well, I do want to say too, I have been going back and redoing the audio on some of the past episodes because it was brought to my attention that some of them were a bit on the quiet side. During editing, they sounded much louder, but I'm going back and redoing that. In the process, some of the pops and times we might bump the mic or whatever do become more apparent. But to go back and re-edit everything to take that out, it's a bit much. So you'll have better audio. You'll be able to hear us better, but you'll hear that as well. I am, however, going to be doing longer edits because for our regular Sunday releases, I try and keep it to an hour and a half-ish maximum. But we record sometimes for like 4 hours for just a single movie. So I'll be doing longer edits of that will be setting up a Patreon that you can go on and hear the longer edits. You'll be able to vote on what movies we talk about. Give us your ideas.
And we will watch anything for the most part.
To an extent.
To an extent. We did a whole episode about that. I think it was episode 3. Well, it was more of a mini episode. But, if there's a movie that you really think needs more attention, we'd love to hear about it. If there's a movie out there that you think is one of the great hidden gems of its time, we live for that shit. So just really tell us about it.
Yeah, like I've not been shy about how I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube reaction channels, and there's some of these movies that when I see somebody doing a reaction for them, I get excited because so many people just completely pass them up. Like there's not a whole lot of reactions for Night of the Demons. I don't think I've seen a single reaction for May. There's some movies that it's like, why don't people react to this? And I just actually saw one a few days ago that I got really excited for because a reaction channel was finally doing a reaction for the movie Hatchet.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, these are some things that let us know because as it is now, we're kind of just grabbing stuff off the shelf. I think one of the things we might do is like we might say, for example, next month we might only pick movies from Netflix. So that way any movie that we're talking about, you can go on and watch it before the show, after the show, but it's not something that you'll have to go and spend a bunch. All you need is your Netflix subscription.
Or a library card. I have found that my local library has a pretty damn good selection of physical media films that really I have nothing to complain about. And modern libraries, they are not like they used to be back in the 80s, the 90s. If you want a movie, all you need is a card, and they give you the movie. You don't pay a thing. For those of you
lucky enough to still have libraries around you.
Yes, unfortunately, not everyone gets equal.
And there's even a lot of movies free on YouTube, so that's an option.
And there are other streaming options besides Netflix and Prime. There's wonderful streaming channels like Plex, Tubi, and Pluto that have great selections of movies, older movies, newer movies, and
we do prefer physical media, but we realize that financially that's not always an option, and even streaming services aren't necessarily always an option. So we want to make sure that we're not always just going to be talking about things that if you want to see it, you got to spend a bunch of money.
Yeah.
We want everybody to be able to enjoy too. We're not limiting ourselves to only horror sci-fi. We just tend to favor those genres.
We haven't really covered a lot of horror movies so far. Night of the Demons and Sleepaway Camp, I think.
It's been a weird selection of movies.
Mm-hmm.
But if we really want to start getting into that, then we're going to get into some of these connections, which we're saving for the next episode.
But be good to each other out there, everybody. We're all stuck together in this crazy train, and we're all we have in here. So bye for now, folks, and we'll see you next time, hopefully.
See you next time.